Welcome to the Starting Over Podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is the show where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. I'm going to do something a little bit different in this episode, and I'm going to list out some of my projections for the game in 2018. I know that you get enough of these shows during the beginning of the year, so I just decided to try to jump on the typical bandwagon. We did the year in review. Now it's time to throw out the projections. I like to thank another YouTube channel I listen to. It's called L2 Inc. or INC, and the guy on there his name's Scott Galloway. And he has some great videos, definitely when it comes to like business and investing. And he gives you a different way of looking at the YouTube process, so to speak, in sort of a more professional manner. You're never too grown to have fun, sort of thing. But I ended up listening to a show about his year in review of the last year, what he predicted would happen and what actually happened. And so I'm going to try to attempt to do that, and hopefully someone will remind me next year in 2019 to go back and listen to this episode and see how much I was right and how much I was wrong. All right. With all this, again, this is mainly speculation, and some of it I think you will find maybe historically useful. Some of it you might just say it's like me just making an episode for fun. So if you're looking for something a little bit more definitive on, like, let's get better, this episode might not help you as much. But this episode will definitely help you, I'm hoping, in making some reservations for the new year. All right, so let's get started. Prediction number one. Rock Online will be the biggest thing in competitive heroclix. The moment that it was announced that they were going to do online tournaments and with Roll20, at first I was like, yeah, this is going to be interesting. But the more I've talked about it and talked around with people that are interested in it and other groups that have done it, the more I realize that Roll20 was an inevitability once heroclix, even when heroclix Online was around. Something like Roll20 was inevitable, mainly because the player base wants to play, but all of a sudden, when you're talking about actually measuring skill and getting people of great skill together, there's no better way to do it than online. Now, here's where my sort of statement of this comes out of. Playing in the Midwest, I could say I've played against some of the best players of the Midwest. And being able to go to a lot of major tournaments, I've been able to play people from around the world. But if I was able to more consistently play a Kenny Pena, a Kevin Fruz, George Masu, people that, or even Phil Isaacson, people that don't live in my area, or within my driving distance for going to tournaments or my normal, fly to events. If I'm able to compete against them regularly, or at least more periodically than just being on, for these major events, I think that it does a major good for all participants. And not only that, it really brings the overall cost of a rock, of participating in a rock, extremely down. If you really look at it, a cost of a rock in an average trip for an individual is at least going to be $25 entry, a minimum of somewhere between $35 to $50 on food. Okay, and you're looking at a minimum $50 in travel. So going to a rock tournament, in most cases, for most people, is about $125 to probably, let's just say, let's lowball a little bit. Let's just say going to a rock tournament is at least around like an $85 to upwards of a $250 endeavor for a weekend, okay, or for one night. So let's just say you're spending like maybe one night at a hotel and you got a good deal. All right. So when we look at that, and I'm told that I can stay at home, eat my own food, be nice and warm in front of my vent where I podcast, have my feet be all nice and warm, not have to worry about, my driving, hypnosis that kicks in, then yeah, I'm going to pick that up. Even if you said, hey man, it's $25 and it's the top tournament where the top 50 ranked rock players in the world are playing this tournament, and let's just say I got into that, okay, which I can sort of believe I could get into that, and even have to pay $35 for that. The amount of experience for little investment is worth it. So the excuse that most people have not to dab their toes into competitive completely goes away once they are able to be educated on Roll20. And so I feel that Roll20 is going to be the economic catalyst that's going to power up rock in terms of participation in tournaments. With that being said, and everything I'm going to say is very respectful, going into my second prediction, there will be a lesser turnout for Rock World Championships than previous years. Now, you might say, but I thought Howard was your boy. Why would you say something bad like that? Howard is my boy. I really, really like him. And this is nothing personal against Howard. But running a group, running a team, and you have to start looking at things beyond yourself, and you look at logistics. And when Howard announced that it was the tournament wasn't going to be in Atlanta anymore, that was going to be in Huntsville, from a business perspective, for Howard, makes complete 100% sense. Okay, his store is there. He's able to run in the store. He doesn't really need to invite any other stores to the events, and a la Dice Addiction. So you can sort of cut them out, put his own store up. If people buy food in the store, he'll get a profit of that. If people, buy from, around there, that's fine. He doesn't have to move inventory, so there's no cost for that. So he can translate that into discounts if he wants to. And he has space to host everything, which we will see. So from Howard's perspective, the cost is really low. And if really push comes to shove, Howard's a really cool guy. I know some people, he would house himself, okay, because he's that type of dude, okay. But when it comes to the travel to get to Huntsville versus Atlanta, the plane trip is double, even over a year out. It's double. When Howard announced it was in Huntsville, I was like, all right. And then I started to look for a plane ticket. And when my plane ticket went up to $400, I was like, what? And then getting a single direct flight went up to like $450. I was like, oh, what? Okay, so for some people coming from the West Coast, the cost of travel hadn't gone up. It's pretty much plateaued off. For some of us in the Midwest, or some of us that fly, flying into Huntsville is a lot more expensive. than flying into Atlanta. Now that's going to be given because Huntsville is not an international hub. Okay, so I mean we know that. Also, I think there's going to be some people that are going to be concerned about rock points and not being able to get enough points, since the invisible black market of I hand you these points and I give you some money and we exchange these points market goes away, at least directly. And so because of that, there are some people that are not directly qualified to be at certain levels, that were able to get at certain levels because they just bought rock points. And again, I've never really been anti buying and exchanging rock points, but now having to go through an online system and maybe having to get those directly exchanged, and the trust factor of, hey bro, I'll go and send you those rock points when I get home, wink wink, nudge nudge, that's a lot more risky of a transaction. Also, if Howard tried to create anything, the cost of introducing anything similar to the TCG player points and actual physical cards would be astronomically more ridiculous in cost to do than just have digital points. Because at least with digital points, you can go in and say like, hey, I can manage this on a server. I don't need to do any encryption. I don't need to get an art designer to make these cards. I don't have to get them printed. I don't have to get the scratch off. You don't have to do a whole bunch of things. You don't have to get the mathematic algorithm to make sure that people won't fake out the cards. I get it. But it does create that market of buying and trading points. It has to either be between parties you really, really trust or you're going to see. So when you add in those costs, you add in, your travel costs, your hotel costs, and now you have to add in transportation costs between the hotel and the venue. Now you can always say like, but I'll get in somebody's ride, and even if I have to strap myself to the top of the car, I'm going to get there, or I'll walk to the venue, or blah blah blah, whatever you're down for. That's still a cost, whether it's time or money. It's an added expense. So there's things that you have to think about. So Rocktober functionally, for some of us, has went from being, this is a really cheap vacation, to this is getting to be a little bit more moderate to moderately expensive vacation. All right. It's also a little bit hard to sell if you have a spouse. Hey, honey, do you want to go to Atlanta and, you'll go and chill and do stuff in, Atlanta, and I'll be playing with my little plastic men. And then, versus, hey, honey, you want to go to Huntsville, Alabama? And again, it's nothing against Huntsville, Alabama, but it's not really known as a vacation spot. So, I do know some people brought their spouses, and I know some relationships have you can go, but I need something to do because I'm not going to sit here and watch you play with little plastic men all day. All right. Not all relationships are Daniel and Samantha Powell, okay? So that's a reality. And again, this is a prediction. And if I'm wrong on this, I would be glad. But I feel that you're going to have fewer people at Rocktober, mainly because of a lot of the factors I've listed previously. Oh, man. My next prediction is that WizKids will have a Broken Con exclusive yet again, but they're going to try to hedge their bet. All right. Now, bear with me why I say this. Okay. Considering the Faust conundrum and them refusing to ban Faust, and then they were like, oh, well, we're going to prematurely retire him, we're going to nerf him, we're going to do all this other stuff, so that they could continue, pumping him out and potentially selling him. I think we lost a lot of confidence in WizKids. Definitely when it came to con exclusives. And then when you start looking at some of their con exclusive history with some of those figures that have been a little bit more than controversial than how we would like. Considering the direct nerf to the pocket tank, and then the watch listing and minor clarification. It's not even an errata, it's a rules clarification, and I hate that they presented it as, oh, it's an errata, and when it's not. It's a rules clarification. With the boxing ring, with all the complications with the boxing ring, I think people have a justified paranoia in buying WizKids products from cons. They just do. Now, WizKids will come back, and I've talked to them about this ever since the Faust thing. This is like a multi-year conversation. And they'll say, like, look, man, we get it. We messed up. We apologize. But if we give you something boring, you won't buy it. If we give you something boring, you won't buy it. It has to be interesting. It has to be different. It has to be new. And my prediction is that they will mess it up again. Whether it is, evident, within the first unveiling, or if it's evident due to a new mechanic that they released and fully didn't think through. It's inevitable. And the main problem that I have with WizKids, main problem I have with WizKids when it comes to how they deal with their con exclusive products, is that I understand that they need to sell these things at a premium, but do you understand how these figures are going to impact the market, impact the game sphere once they land? Like, have you actually played a game with this? Not just design it, not just hand it off to play testing, not just scribble the math and the algorithm theorem to the side. Did you really play with this, WizKids? Did you look at all the stuff that you were bringing out, or things that you've already brought out that would be considered modern age for that figure, and just said, hey man, let me try to make the most brokenest team? Or I know playtesters, let me have them make the most brokenest team, or what they felt was the most offending team with this piece, and then I will, go ahead and play with this and see what happens. Or I will, watch a recording of a playthrough with this broken piece. And you know what? If they did that, I would have a lot more confidence in WizKids when it comes to their con exclusives, but they don't do that. They don't have time to do that. And I could comment more on WizKids structure when it comes to how they run their business, but that's a whole nother show, because how they run their business is unfortunately counterintuitive to people that actually want to make money, but they make money. So yeah, there you go. All right, so I'm gonna bet that there's going to be something broken, and I'll even make a double bet that they'll try introducing a new mechanic into the con exclusives, and I'll make a triple bet on there. They're going to have con exclusive ID cards. So yeah, we're going to see that this year. Okay. All right, let's move on to my next prediction. Is that we are not going to get very good sets until mid to late year, either after Origins or sometime around September, October. Maybe the November, December set, maybe. But we're not going to get anything that good until then. Now, you might say, wow, that's very depressing on the game. And I didn't realize it at first, but pretty much that's what WizKids has been doing. So, just bear with me as I sort of go through this little history over like the last few years, and you'll start to realize, like, oh crap, this is going on. All right, so let's go all the way back, and we'll look at World's Finest. Now, World's Finest came out in that spring, and that was like, woohoo, yay! Thank you, WizKids, for giving us something great. All right, so we go forward, and we're like, yeah, this is the way the game's going. And then we get Uncanny X-Men. We get Civil War OP slop, which, you know, we already know what it is. Then we get Superior Foes. Superior Foes is a very, very solid set. Lo and behold, it's our September-October-ish set. Then we get some Ninja Turtles, and then we get Joker's Wild. Joker's Wild is a really bad set, minus 3 figures, but those 3 figures are absurdly good. And that's, you know, Bizarro Green Arrow, Jakeem, and Green Lantern. But really, if you look at Superior Foes, there's more things in Superior Foes that actually sets the tempo of where the game is going and does go for almost a year. And it's your September-October set. So then you fast forward a bit, and you look at parity. And if you're on AC Realms, just sort of slide it over where you start looking at Spider-Man, Superior Foes, or Superior Foes of Spider-Man. And you look at Superior Foes of Spider-Man all the way through to Elseworlds. And guess what? Everything is sort of on par. I didn't realize this until I actually started to put this together. Okay, just about everything is on par. All right. If you go into the previous year, where is Superman and Wonder Woman set? Okay, here you go. Yeah. If you sort of look at the Superman and Wonder Woman set, in and of itself, it almost started it, and then you can start to see like that set wasn't supposed to come out then. It was almost like the time release for World's Finest and Superman Wonder Woman was swapped. And that may be because of the Batman versus Superman movie, which is what I think really happened. Alright, so keep going, and you look at your TMNT 2, you look at your Joker's Wild, TMNT 3, Deadpool and X-Force, Avengers Defenders War, which really wasn't an Avengers Defenders War. It was just like, hey, here's more Avengers and a couple of Defenders. Your Wonder Woman, your What If, and your Elseworlds. Out of all of those sets, you have a few outliers. You have, of course, Green Arrow, Goblin King, the Raven, Avengers Defenders War. You have Hawkeye. You have Ironheart. You also have, Doctor Strange, Earth Guardian. Like you have a lot of good stuff, but it's not in Sam Cap. Like you have a lot of good stuff. It's not OP, but it's a lot of solid stuff. It's balanced, which I actually enjoy. I actually feel it's good. You have Deadpool and the X-Force. It's all comparable. It's all comparable, and it all sort of flows together. Superior Foes of Spider-Man set the tone all the way up till, really, hell, you can even say Undead. But I would really say Undead is an anomaly. But out of all those, which one really was the better set? From a design perspective and from a utility perspective and a depth of character perspective. And I'm not just saying from a super rares perspective. And I would easily argue it was Superior Foes of Spider-Man. You can skim that set really quickly and see a lot of figures that are still played or playable today. Like, I'm just looking at it real quick. All right. I like the Kingpin a little bit now. He's useful, and I've seen him pop up. Let's look here. Venom and Anti-Venom are still viable for local play. Anaconda, unfortunately, Lashina gets rid of Anaconda. That really does suck. Norman Osborn is still good. Overdrive is still used a lot. Tiger Shark is still solid. Speed Demon was used for a bit. And so was Boomerang. It all depends on what type of Sinister 16 you're running. Or Sinister Syndicate, Sinister Syndicate team you're running. And then you get, Mephisto. You get Hyper Spidey. You still have Frogman. Frogman got some good use for a good chunk of the year. Chameleon, Ares because of the ID card. There's a lot of stuff still here that is, viable. All right, but if you go forward and you look at Thor sort of set this point where we were like, what? A bunch of, beaters came out of here and started wrecking stuff and destroying things. All right, that's great. And, of course I got some little backup guys, but so what? I got a bunch of big, attackers for moderate points. And they were melee focused. And you start looking at Harley Quinn, and you start to see some of that reflected in Harley Quinn. It's just the quality isn't as good. All right. So I think really what it's coming down to, unfortunately, and this is just a speculation, WizKids really has not adapted to having the World Championships at Origins. From a design perspective or a design cycle perspective. And this is speculation. I don't have any psychic eye and WizKids, and I'm not remote reading them, sitting from my chair, back in my office doing this podcast. If I seriously look at when they're introducing new ideas, it's that September set. It can be Colossal Retaliation, as one of their big new core ideas. I won't argue for the FX stuff, because pretty much 2016 they tried to pimp that hard, and it really didn't go over too well. But you can start to see when they're trying to introduce new ideas, they're more likely to introduce new ideas in the fall than they are in the spring. Even though, you could say, look at ID cards. ID cards came out during the summer, but that was mainly, I would feel, is from a promotional standpoint. So, I would tell you, get the figures that you like, but pretty much most of the figures that we are going to see going forward, I feel, we're going to have a few outliers, some things that are going to be, cool, but I don't think we're going to see any game changers like Hammer of Thor until late next year. And then we also have to realize that since it's not an anniversary year, we're going to get a lot fewer sets this year, in 2018, which means that the tempo of meta advancement may taper off, which at the same time is good, because we have too much product and too many new elements being added for us to really examine and say is what we have right now that we consider the top of the top really the top of the top, or are we just taking the shorthand from other people's work? So that's something for us to consider, realistically. All right. My next projection or prediction is that we're going to see both Rocktober and Origins in all categories in Origins, teams, singles, and U.S. nationals, be won by a person or persons on a team. I know that that's an easy bet to make, but I really feel like that's a bet that I can double down on, or triple down on, or quad down on. And it's not just from what happened last year. It's just that overall, I don't see someone not in a team doing well, and I don't see someone not in a team having access to the resources of the pool of figures that you need. And when I say pool of figures, I really do mean pool of figures. Like I can get access to 2 or 3 copies of major figures, for teammates to run or whatever. I think that element is huge. I think that the economy of that is huge. There are very few people that can afford to just drop money and drop money and drop money on the game. And when you start to realize that, it makes you look at the whole affair a lot differently. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the barrier and gateway to success right now is how many people do you have allied with you. Now, some people might say, "Hey, Edward, you're using your platform to bully potential competition," and I would more so say it's like, no, I would rather my competition get organized. And I know that sounds really, really bad, arrogant, but I think it's necessary, because if the competition of the average player does not get organized, competitive play is probably going to die out in 2 to 3 years. In so much that the barrier to entry will be insurmountable. And as things progress, if you're coming in and you're a new person and you are enjoying the game and you want to be at that highest table, or feel that you deserve to be at that highest table, how are you going to overcome Team Pusheen or 4 points? How are you going to overcome Ragnarok? How are you going to overcome Team Juggernaut? And I'm not saying, bringing up any of these teams for controversy's sake or leaving out other teams for controversy's sake. But if you can sort of listen to those names and then say like, oh yeah, I know at least 2 members in that team that would do really well. Or, oh yeah, I know people around this parts, are really familiar with this team, blah, 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 blah. You can understand that when all those teams get together, how much of a wall an individual person has to come through. Now, you could say, like, Adam Friedman. Adam Friedman's not on the team. Phil Isaacson isn't on a team. They do great. And again, there's the argument for exceptional individual. But I also know that Adam Friedman has connections. And Adam Friedman practices with a lot of well-known people. And I'll just leave it at that. It's not my job to dox Adam. Okay, but I know he practices with some really high-caliber people. So he's utilizing the same elements of a team without it being called as such. Okay? So, overall, I think if people don't start looking at the team structure, it's just going to create problems. And unfortunately, we are not in like a system where we have like a draft, let alone a way for people who say that they're interested in meta to contact most of these teams. Some of the teams have podcasts or members that are on a podcast. I know, like my team, I have 3 podcasters on my team. So I have 3 other media. So there's 3 media people on Phoenix Nest.
So people will know about Phoenix Nest. That's easy. But, if you're going to talk about, like, let's take Juggernaut, for example, you might be able to, know that, hey, Jamie Jordan was on the Quarry. So I know if I, look for Jamie the Beard on HC Realms, that I might be able to get in contact with him. And I live in, the Arkansas area. So I that would be my point of contact. There are very few people, that are the faces of some of these teams. If you're in like New York, New Jersey, then you might want to contact Kenji or Kenji from Pusheen, and why am I going blank? I know his name, Kenny. Kenny Pena. On Pusheen. Those, it's easy to, try to talk to those guys, or Paris from Ragnarok, or Patrick on Majestics, but all these teams have different requirements of, like, the caliber of player that you have to be, your commitment to travel, your actual physical location matters for some of these teams. So you can have a great player in Utah, and guess what? Like, they might be out of luck. Like, they just might be out of luck when it comes to most of the resources. But that's, again, why I say, like, Rock Online this year is probably going to be the biggest, most influential thing that's going to develop players. But I digress. Let me go and move on to my next bet and prediction for this year. My next bet and prediction for this year is that more than any other time in the game, we are going to reach meta singularities. We're going to reach meta singularities rapidly. And here's why I say this. Roll20 is not just, look at the Rock tournament and people are going to play in a Rock tournament, and then, there's a bunch of Rock tournaments going on online, bringing in a lot of people, and that's one element of the homogenization that will occur. Because you're going to see the results of these Rock tournaments. They're going to be up on Lucky Dice Games. They're going to be up on Majestics. There's going to be enough coverage from the heroclix social media and podcasting groups that you're going to know what the top 4 teams were. And if you have another Rock Online tournament the following week, or 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, boom, 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 you're going to hit this compounding. And with fewer sets in a year, that leads to less figure diversity, even though you can argue last year there was a lot of chaff. A lot of chaff. Like Wonder Woman said, I'm looking at you. What if I'm looking at you? Even if you sift through and got rid of most of the chaff, you have a decent pool of figures. But next year, pulling out, game-changing figures or unique figures or abstract figures are going to be a lot harder, because there's not going to be this huge influx of new figures. Now, because of that, playing online with the Rock tournaments are going to be huge. But you're also going to see another thing that I find interesting, is I predict that you're going to start seeing the introduction of new play partnerships or organic play partnerships. Not just between high-level players, but between adequate players and intermediate with high, and high players with pro players. Okay? And I know someone can argue, what's really the difference between a high player and a pro player? And realistically, it's travel. And as travel becomes less of an experience boon, you're bound to see some of the major problems of competition narrow in terms of experience. But in terms of like access and getting quality practice, I think that's going to be facilitated, between individuals and between teams. And I have another prediction about that too. But with that being said, these practices and ideas are going to quantify and push together and rebuild these stars in the meta. And this last year, I feel that our two major sort of stars intellectually was PJ Bolin and Mr. Oh my! I was about to mess up, and I was about to say Mr. Eddie Brock. It's not. It's Easton Brock. Sorry, it's late and I'm tired. And Easton Brock. Those were two major innovators. And then I can argue and say that from a podcasting standpoint, that you're looking at Aaron Cantu as probably your third pillar of that. Fourth would be the cohorts of the Meta Lab, just from a popularity standpoint. Okay, so when we look at our, sort of the two major stars of thought and the philosophies that they've introduced constructs that are still in the game, a la the overdrive rush tactic, being popularized by PJ from his Origins national team. Then you also have Easton's version of Unimind. Now you can argue that Daniel Powell had a better version of Unimind because he won, because it had less liabilities, but it was still based off of the framework provided by Easton. So again, it's not a detraction from Daniel, but it's just more of an observation that he wasn't really the origin of that particular framework. So anyway, I feel there's going to be other people that are going to say, like, hey, look, these frameworks are viable, these frameworks are good, and then we're going to grind those out, and then we're going to be even narrowed down. So like I said, I think we're going to see singularities happen in the game a lot faster because more players are getting connected to each other. This one I'm going out on a limb on, but I think this is going to be necessary. And sort of going back to my elements and sort of my conversation about teams, I feel that you're going to see more team alliances, and you might actually see inter-team scrimmages. Now, those may not be public, but I think those as an occurrence are going to happen more formally than before. Now, here's why I say that. Now go back to what I said about everybody's on roll 20. Okay, now you start adding in, if you know that Phoenix Nest has a lot of good players, and I'm the captain of Phoenix Nest, and I say, like, you know what, this year I added a bunch of good people, and I've done some training, and I've done some good stuff, and, they have some nice tech and stuff. You know what, I have a really good relationship with Jamie Jordan, and he's got some new guys too. So what if we had like a JV scrimmage and, we just let the guys sort of and girls go at each other and play. And we sort of do a round robin thing where you play somebody on the other team, and then, we'll just sort of sit there and watch, and we'll take notes, and it'll be a productive thing for both parties. Now, I'm just saying that, that is an idea. But it really does help, and it's going to help in a couple of ways. Number one, teams that actually recruit would be able to take some of the training burden off of the internal experienced staff. Everybody's got lives. And I told, the crew in Phoenix Nest that's been around, like, look, man, I'm not training all these new people by myself. Like, y'all are doing this too. And I got good backup from that. And that's, sometimes from a leadership perspective, you can't haul everybody on your back and take them to the promised land. That doesn't happen. But also getting good experience where, you can run experimental tech and not worry about that tech getting out. Definitely, if like, for example, let's just say Phoenix Nest scrimmage with Pusheen. I have one member in their area, and more than likely, he's not running anything that we would be playtesting with. Okay? And so it would be mutually beneficial for us to scrimmage. Because we're not in each other's area in general. Okay? It's just like it would be mutually beneficial if, like, I could scrimmage with Majestics. All right. Now, I could say scrimmage with Juggernaut because we're on good terms. I mean, Jamie's my boy. Okay? Even before the quarry. So, there's that. He was there at my first rock. All right. But it definitely would not benefit me to scrimmage with Ragnarok. That is direct competition. We are going to most likely have somebody in a state that a Ragnarok member can, go into. So there's things like that you gotta consider. And again, newer players getting together, getting organized, making, minor teams that turn into bigger teams. Like, yeah, that would be great. And this is a great opportunity for that, but it also requires leadership and people to follow behind a vision. And that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do to have people to not just believe in you, the leader, but believe in the vision that you're presenting. And I can say that as a leader and a follower. It's really hard. With the little time as I have, it's really hard for someone to come up to me and it's like, here's my vision, come follow me. I'm like, unless you're Jesus, no. I got stuff to do, so there's those things. But anyway, I have one more prediction, and I'm going to wrap it up after this prediction, because I know it's approaching the typical hour mark. So I want to make it sort of good. My last prediction going into 2018 is that WizKids will not, I repeat, will not introduce a new resource this year. Now again, I'm not psychically projecting myself in the meetings, listening to Zoran talk about how he's going to market everything. And shoot, I can be disproven in this upcoming Wolverine and X-Men set and find out that there's a round table or some sort of, Xavier schoolgrounds, security cerebro resource that you're able to pop your ID cards in or whatever. I can be proven wrong on this. And I'm really going out on a limb. But I do believe that we are not going to see another resource. And here's why. WizKids realized last year that they were doing R&D on elements that, in all honesty, most players weren't using, and that's special objects. If it was not for the rock, the average competitive player would not be using special objects. Now, your home player, they're playing wacky racer rules. I don't even think they're playing the WizKids rules, 9 times out of 10. Like, they probably got, side stat sheets and little special abilities and traits that certain characters have earned and all this other stuff. And, maybe, just maybe, I'm going to run with Tim Hunter. And the Tim Hunter is on the mission with Justice League Dark. And then they encounter Livewire. And so Livewire is with, Parasite and Giganta. And so they fight, and then Tim Hunter gains the skill, Spell Hex. he's able to use perplex, for free twice a turn or something some silly stuff like that. And then, the characters are in jail or they're defeated, or if they get KO'd, then they're removed from the scenario for so long or whatever. I've heard all sorts of cool little weird stories, and maybe I should do a show about cool weird ideas for playing heroclix when you're not playing competitive. But yeah, I don't think they're going to introduce another resource. I think that they realized real quickly that once you introduce objects, you have a role for them inside of your game. That players will spend money, lots of money, tracking down resources for, and I use a word, but not resources like we're thinking about, but resources and actual resources. The players will track down actual resources and buy boosters because the overall cost of buying some of these game elements individually outweighs the cost of boosters, thus increasing the value of the booster by lottery. And I know you would say the booster's value is by lottery anyway, but it's a difference between, hey, I have a chance of winning 100 million versus a chance of winning 1 billion. Okay. And some people, and I know I talk to people I buy my brick, I buy my case, come at me from the perspective of that if you do hit the lottery, that you gain more from your brick or case than if you bought all of those elements or specific key elements individually on eBay. And I get that. I fully get that gamble and that bet. But for me personally, I can't do that. But going back to my point, WizKids gets very little profit from mailing out prize kits with resources. They get very little profit from selling resources directly out to retailers. There's very little profit in that, and way too much work. But there's not that much work, and and a lot of profit from inscribing a little doodad that you can change its color or change its base, and you could just double up on the sculpt, and no one cares as long as it does something different. Think about that. Think about that really closely. I know we get on WizKids about resculpts, but look at the weapons from Hammer of Thor. Oh my gosh. They pulled a number on us and we didn't even blink twice. We didn't blink twice because we didn't care. Okay? As long as I was able to get, my Stormbreaker and my Thunderstrike, I was happy. I didn't care that they had, the mace as another cohort that looked exactly the same. Okay, so from a profit perspective, they gain a lot more from introducing special objects and ID cards. Definitely if ID cards are low rarity, a la, 2 per case or 1 per brick, and you introduce 20 of them. You make more money, versus having a, like they did with Kryptonite. I hope they never do that again. You could get tons and tons and tons of Kryptonite back in the day during the Superman set. The rarity wasn't so much that, they're scarce. The rarity was just overflowing. But if you turn down that rarity, and you make cards a lot more difficult to get, and not only that, the cards have rarities among themselves, you're going to push hard on booster sales. You're going to sell out. That is a guarantee. Not only that, and I'm going to say it real bluntly, your secondary market will be very vibrant, whether it's your trading market or your eBay market. They're going to be very vibrant in people trying to make deals to get these pieces, in particular these additional game elements. Not necessarily the pieces, but the additional game elements is more what I'm pointing to. So I feel like if I'm WizKids, I see more profit in not doing resources, so I don't have to worry about rebalancing and worrying about messed up point cost, and I have minor advantages and unique advantages that are adequate, that you feel like if they are put on a higher point figure, they don't scale infinitely up, and it wouldn't make a character way more broken, and you give them elements that are standard or reasonable, or have disadvantages like Casket of Ancient Winners, stuff like that. But yeah, that's it. I know it's weird. I did a prediction show, all the other jazz, but I really do think there is some cool stuff coming for us in 2018. I think WizKids is learning some lessons. I think WizKids is not fully learning the competitive lesson in terms of consistency. I don't think they are also fully understanding the event planning, and I don't think they're fully understanding the idea of having a cohesive vision for a block. I think they're close. Like, as I said before, like, look, from, superior foes to this point, it's been pretty consistent. So I'll say this. I think WizKids is poised into 2018 to either do one of the following really well. Stay the same, or make steps and some stumbles so that 2019 is better. Now, I can easily say, yeah, I hope for the latter versus the former. But I would personally, if I was able to be WizKids right now, I would immediately do two things really quick. First thing I would do is I would snap my fingers and I would say, this is how you're going to be qualified for U.S. Nationals for the next 5 years. We're going to commit to this for the next 5 years. U.S. Nationals is going to be first place only gets a bid for Nationals. We're going to offer up these many spots, and we're going to have these many WizKids Opens. WizKids Opens for the next 5 years is going to have this type of kit. Or you even could say for the next year it's going to have this type of kit. We are locking WizKids Opens to this many. And just be like, all right, so if you already have your bid, you're only going to get your nom for U.S. Nationals from WizKids Opens and no other events. Okay, or they could say you could get them from WizKids Opens and special WizKids Opens, which are, if we're at a con and we're holding a tournament, and we're going to let everybody know. And if I was also WizKids, I would also be like, here is our year's schedule. Like getting that schedule, getting that set. Because we already know you're going to be at Gen Con. We already know you're going to be at Origins. We know you're going to be at all these other different cons. So stop pretending like you're not. All these other cons got their stuff together already. They have the next year planned as the current year is going. Okay, so I digress. But if I was WizKids and I was in charge of all the competitive stuff, and even if Zoran said to me, hey, buddy, you want to work with us and you could telecommute, and I would really mean it. I would have to be able to telecommute. I need to be staying where I'm at, because moving out to the East Coast is too dang expensive for what they would give me. I'm like, all right, I stay where I'm at. I'll telecommute, and I'll run your entire competitive department. I would take it. I would have to stop doing the show, and I get that. And I can only play rock, and I would have to be at Origins and a bunch of other conventions and sit there and shake hands and deal with player crap and all other stuff. I understand. And I'll have to deal with the casual saying, oh my gosh, they gave that troll dark logos, or rolling whiz kids, God forbid, But it would be done, and I would be on top of that. I'd be like, boom, 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 boom. Like, this is like 3 weeks. This is 3 weeks of organizational planning. I mean, the only issue I would see is like, we don't have the money because NECA took the money from us. So we can't pre-register and guarantee we're going to be there because we don't know if we'll have the money. Doop-de-doo. Yeah. So, I mean, because we all know by now that pretty much WizKids is the golden goose for NECA. But that's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother show. Just sweep that under the rug, pat it down real good, and we'll talk about that another day. All right, I'd like to thank you all for listening to today's show. You can find me on Twitter at StartOverPod. It came from outer space and told me, man, you bought too many lessons from Udemy. I personally feel right now a lot of TV is designed to make you human cattle and to fall into certain philosophical views based purely off of emotion. But all right, you can email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com if you wish to opine. Keep it piffy, keep it interesting, keep it awesome, baby. Go real quick. Also, slight plug. Go check out my good friend Devin's YouTube channel, Happy Little heroclix. I was on there being silly when he came and visited my local venue. So anyway, and last but not least, you can go over to the blog, the startingoverpodcast.blogspot.com, the grave of my hopes and dreams of writing about heroclix by WizKids. And you can donate to the show and give me hope to focus more on YouTube, because I don't get ad revenue anymore, because I love you and I love your faces. All right, that's it. I'd like to thank you all for listening once again. And remember, we all have to start over sometime.